there are some lingering questions. Do we see some storms develop? I think we focus on that large swath of damaging winds. This is going to be through parts of the Midwest. So Missouri, Illinois, Iowa, maybe getting closer to Chicago. It'll be unique because we have a couple of fronts that are going to be involved, but there is a high confidence here because we will have the forcing necessary. Yeah. There's going to be a dry line that's going to set up itself in parts of Missouri and Iowa as this very strong area of low pressure, this low that we've been highlighting, how it's going to be at the surface, very low, could be getting close to record lows. That's going to lead to a response from the surface all the way to the upper levels of the atmosphere. And that response is going to be the form of some very fast and very intense storms. And it's possible we could have just a line of severe storms racing across parts of the Midwest, producing hurricane force winds. I mean, not out of the realm of possibilities.
And I think the thing to remember, as the low continues to deepen Friday over portions of Iowa and Nebraska, out ahead of it, you're going to have a ton of moisture to help supply these storms. And the storms that do form, even if it's not a tornado-warned storm, you may get sirens that go off as a result of the winds that could exceed 70, 75 miles per hour. Those could still be incredibly dangerous, in which you want to get to an interior room. Timing will be important, and while we watch everything, it does look like it starts to get really activated later in the day on Friday. And the winds associated with this are going to be quite strong.
We're taking a live look this morning in St. Louis. That's Union Square, the Ferris wheel. And in St. Louis, it's a challenging forecast because, and we were talking, this is sort of when we discussed the timing, because it does look like this could be an event for St. Louis after sunset. While storms will race across Iowa, maybe north central Illinois, the mode might be slightly different the farther south you head, including parts of western Missouri and east central Illinois. As these storms move through 9 o'clock or so, it's possible that this environment becomes, look at that, a little more discrete, where we could be dealing with a line of storms, but there's also a possibility that we could have a mixed mode going on here, where there are supercells. And if that would be the case, these supercells will have an environment that could spawn strong tornadoes. Let's hope we don't see that, but there is a tornado threat that we have to pay attention to. Notice, though, how that tornado threat, it's chiseled off the farther north you head. It does look like that's going to be more wind driven. We don't really have that supportive environment where the winds are veering with height. But farther to the south, and that's the big question, that's kind of the second part of this system. If we get storms to form there, these could be some strong tornadoes and supercells as well.
Further to the south on Friday, especially later in the day, appears a little bit more conditional, but it doesn't mean that you should let your guard down. I think further away from the low that you go, you lose out on some of the shear, obviously directional and speed shear. But there is that potential, certainly on Saturday, to see things really amplify. This is the timing, noticing that overnight threat Stephen was just mentioning, the later post-dark storms further to the north through Missouri, Illinois, maybe a little bit of Arkansas, but then we start to turn our attention further to the south by the time we get into Saturday.
And what we see tomorrow night is going to play a big role in what we might see play out Saturday, especially through the Tennessee and Ohio River valleys. Let's focus on Saturday, 5 a.m. You see our Fox weather, our exclusive future radar showing you what it could look like. And not a ton of activity to kick off the day on Saturday. And that might be a trend that we have to watch today. What are forecast models telling us overnight Friday into Saturday? The less activity we see, the more pristine this environment could be for severe weather. This is what's so remarkable, I guess, when we look at outlooks, because a level 4 out of 5 threat for Saturday, we haven't seen something this far out of day 3 in a few years. The fact that we have one, and also that this could be the zone where we see yet again strong tornadoes. The ingredients, while they are nice from a severe perspective through the Midwest, this is where the SPC actually mentioned, Liz Lightman, calling this environment pristine.
Pristine, untouched on Friday. Tapped into on Saturday.
And the dew points are going to be so much higher here. We'll have a stronger low-level jet. We'll also have a very supportive upper-level wind pattern. Those upper-level winds are going to be rocking. I mean, a jet streak, perhaps at 115 miles an hour. It's very strong.
Yeah, and so you get more of the forcing mechanisms on Saturday for areas further to the south. And a lot of those winds will likely be transported to the ground. You allow these storms to really breathe and vertically develop. You'll get incredibly strong updrafts, wind transferred to the ground. You get supercell development. You talk about the risk for tornadoes. I mean, we're going to throw it all in there. Everything but the kitchen sink, as they say. Storm rotation potential has been an interesting thing to watch. We talked about this yesterday. Yesterday, we were nearing off the charts when it came to that high potential when you looked into areas of Mississippi and into Alabama. And again, this would be Saturday afternoon, but we watch this evolve even as we get further into the day and into the evening hours.
Yeah, this parameter measures instability in the atmosphere. It's something called CAPE, an acronym, which is just a measure of how much energy we have stored in the atmosphere. And then we also consider just that natural rotation, right? Is there going to be a potential that we have for storms to rotate, the term known as helicity? And it does look very favorable. And unlike what we might see, let's say, farther to the north, where maybe overnight storms on Friday into Saturday might rob some of that energy, look at that storm energy that we have along the Gulf Coast. That could really spell some problems. We're also going to watch this secondary surface low along the boundary that we're tracking, because we've got the big low, but then we'll have this surface low that's going to aid in pulling up additional moisture, also bringing in those winds at the mid-levels out of the southwest. So to have a level 4 out of 5 threat is pretty significant. I wanted to mention, because when we look at these categorical outlooks, the level 4, the Storm Prediction Center technically calls it a moderate risk. That indicates a potential for widespread severe weather with several tornadoes or numerous severe thunderstorms, some of which may be intense. It's not one that's flippantly issued.
Right.
Rarely do we ever see a level 5, but to have a level 4 so far out, it does speak to what forecast models are at least telling us this morning.
Yeah, when we talk about the significance of it as well, and for perspective, the last time we did have an outlook on a day 3 at that moderate risk, that was back in March of 2022.
Right.
Something that we discussed was when we had the tornado, it was an EF3 that hit Arabi, Louisiana. It caused significant destruction. There was one loss of life and injuries, but this hit in the darkness of the night. And I believe I was here for this one because it was before midnight, but it was in the evening hours of March 22nd, and it went through some of the parishes not too far from New Orleans.
You're right. It was and caught on camera too, seeing a storm this intense. And when you have a day 3 outlook and forecasters are able to pinpoint a zone where we could see severe weather, and then this is what ends up playing out, it does speak to why we sometimes use, or the SPC is able to use that level 4 out of 5 risk so far out, because strong tornadoes will occur. A strong tornado is classified as EF2 or greater. But that day alone, I guess over those several days, we had a total of 78 tornado reports. So we did have an outbreak back in March of 2023. So it bears watching. And it's almost as if history telling us, hey, in the month of March, watch out in Louisiana, because we have the same zone under the risk for seeing some really intense weather on Saturday.
Very similar language and a similar atmospheric setup. So learning from that and knowing the risk as we head into Friday, Saturday. Let's get into Sunday, because Sunday we also have an outlook from the Storm Prediction Center. Sunday is the final day of this multi-day stretch. The same system again that's racing out of the plains eventually is going to be ejecting off to the east. Actually, the low pressure is going to eject off to the north, but we have to wait for that cold front to swing through. So you look to Sunday, and now we're looking at the eastern seaboard, the I-95 corridor from North Florida all the way up into portions of the Northeast. Generally speaking, based on storm mode, we'll more than likely see more of a line of thunderstorms racing across, less of a risk for some of the supercells. However, it does depend on where you are. Now, I think it'll be different if you're further to the north, if you're north of the Carolinas, then if you're south, you'll have different atmospheric conditions at play. But still, the severe risk is a level 2 for that entire stretch.
And when we look at days, I mean, we're still several days away from Sunday, right?
Yes, we are.
I mean, this is a day 4 outlook, and it's remained consistent. But the overall thinking is that as this system evolves, we will have more of a straight line event. But as you had said, the farther south we head, that's where that wind profile could be a bit more conducive for tornadoes. Doesn't mean that we will have them, but that's probably where we'll see the higher risk. When we're this far out, day 4, we're not going to get those categorical risks where you look at the different parameters, severe winds, large hail, and tornadoes. But we will get those as we head a little closer. Day 1 and day 2 from the SPC is when we see those issues. But it bears watching too.
Yeah.
It's a multi-day threat that we're going to deal with.
Bet on a lot of this energy maintaining as everything forges eastward.